The chamber of the Galactic Concord was silent, heavy with tension, as representatives from 100 alien worlds stared at the lone human delegation across the wide hall of mirrors and starlight. Ambassador Elena Ruiz stood at the edge of the polished platform, her sharp eyes moving slowly from one alien face to the next, some scaled, some furred, some floating behind shields of energy, but all with the same expression: smug, expectant, dismissive. For years, Earth had tried to negotiate fair terms, to be treated as equals in the galactic community, to gain access to technology that other races shared freely among themselves, but always withholds from humans. Humans were considered the newcomers, the latecomers, the unpredictable species that grew too fast and spoke too loudly. Elena knew what they all thought: that humans should be grateful they were allowed into the Concord at all. She remembered the last meeting clearly, when Earth's request to lead a neutral colonization mission had been laughed at by the Solaran speaker, a 10-limbed creature that coiled in its throne like a smug serpent. Even now, the speaker was grinning, its long fingers tapping the armrest, waiting for the humans to grovel again. But not today. Elena took one step forward and spoke, her voice calm but cold. "We came in peace. We offered friendship. We respected your rules, even when they cost us. For 70 years we waited for your respect. We waited for the seat at your table to mean something. We waited for equality. Today we stop waiting." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber, but she continued. "From this moment forward, Earth withdraws from the Concord. All trade routes through human space will be closed. All embassies will be evacuated. Any further contact must be requested through secure channels and will be subject to review." A few gasps echoed, and the chair of the Concord, an elder Yalori with a glowing crown of biolight, tried to speak, but Elena raised a hand. "We do not leave in anger. We leave in clarity. You have made your position clear. So now we will make ours." Without another word, she turned and walked away, her delegation following in silence. The chamber remained quiet until the large obsidian doors closed behind them. Then murmurs broke out, questions whispered between species, calculations already forming in the minds of political strategists, but none of them truly understood what had just happened. Outside, Earth's embassy ships lifted off from orbit, sleek black vessels with no visible engines, moving smoothly into the stars. The human sector went dark in the Concord's network systems within hours. No signals, no access, no response. At first, the Concord leaders felt relief. One less voice in their endless arguments, one less unpredictable element. But in the days that followed, ships passing near the Terran border stopped reporting in. Probes disappeared. A Sularan scout cruiser that entered the Kuiper Belt for a routine scan lost all power and drifted until it was recovered by a merchant vessel, its crew unconscious and its memory banks erased. Warnings began to spread. Human space was changing. Their signals were no longer in standard frequencies. Their old colonies, some abandoned, some thriving, went silent. Satellites that had once broadcast music, news, or tourist guides now repeated only one cold message in every known language: "Do not enter." Some species laughed it off, assuming Earth was throwing a tantrum. Others grew cautious, remembering how quickly humans adapted in the past. Elena Ruiz returned to Earth unnoticed, her ship slipping through a corridor guarded by automated defense systems that no one had ever seen before. Above the blue planet, massive structures had begun forming. In orbit, rings, platforms, stations, unlike any the Concord had ever allowed humans to build. Something was happening, something the galaxy didn't expect. In their arrogance, they believed humanity needed them. But they had forgotten the most dangerous trait of humans. When ignored, they learned. When pushed, they endured. And when Abandoned, they built their own future. The final meeting was over. The age of diplomacy had ended. Now the stars would see what humanity could become, without limits. In the cold, dark stretches of the galaxy, near forgotten trade lanes and quiet moons, strange things began to happen after the humans left the Concorde. At first, it was just whispers, small things. A missing cargo ship here, a communication delay there, but soon the rumors grew louder, spreading from station to station like wildfire through dry brush, carried by nervous traders and uncertain soldiers. The first true report came from a merchant vessel called Sapphire Crest, a sturdy ship used to carrying precious ores from the mining colonies in the outer reach. On its last voyage, it passed near the edge of what used to be human space, and then vanished without sending a distress signal. A week later, its sister ship, the Falaran Wind, arrived at the same route, only to find the Sapphire Crest, floating silently in open space, lights dimmed, engines cold, and no crew in sight, not dead, not hurt, just gone, every escape pod, untouched. Every personal item left behind, as if the entire crew had stepped out for air and never returned. The captain of the Falaran Wind, a hardened Brenari with 6 cycles of service, transmitted a warning beacon before turning around at full burn, refusing to answer questions when he returned, eyes full of fear and lips sealed tight. The Concorde Council dismissed it as superstition or pirate interference, but the incidents didn't stop. Next, it was a Sularan patrol craft, heavily armed, designed to resist stealth attacks and gravity traps, which went silent 20 minutes. After entering the asteroid belts near Mars, sending only one blurred image back, a shadow, long and strange, floating beside Saturn's rings before the feed cut out. Then, a Van diplomat shuttle crossed into human space by accident, escorted by 2 elite fighter drones, and neither shuttle nor drones returned. Only the diplomat's personal datasphere was found days later, drifting near the edge of the Kepler corridor, pulsing with a looped message that simply said, "You were warned." Fear grew quietly among the stars, but most of the conquered leaders still refused to believe that humans could pose any true threat. They had always been loud, curious, emotional, but also too new, too scattered to challenge the galaxy's ancient powers. Yet now they had vanished behind their own borders, and something was guarding that silence. Pirates and smugglers, braver or greedier than most, tried to slip past the Terran borders, hoping to steal tech or gather information to sell. But those who returned told strange stories of ships that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Black, as void, moving without sound, without heat, without light, shutting down entire systems in seconds before vanishing again. They described boarding parties made of tall figures with blank helmets and no voices, who left no marks but always took the ship's core memory and navigation logs before letting the pirates drift back towards safe space, with systems slowly returning one by one. No one was killed, but the message was clear. Go further, and you may not come back at all. One famous mercenary, Captain Drelth of the Free Fang, known for taking impossible jobs, gathered a crew of 50 and charged deep into the new Terran. Silence, broadcasting their route openly, taunting the humans on every frequency. They were never heard from again, and their last image, captured by a listening post on the edge of the Cygnus Fold, showed Drelth's ship frozen mid-flight, surrounded by strange hexagonal lights forming a sphere around them, before everything faded to static. Panic began to creep into political meetings and security briefings, though no leader dared admit it out loud. The humans were not just hiding, they were preparing, watching, doing things the rest of the galaxy could not understand. No new signals came from Earth, no ships left. Human space, and no embassies answered conquered calls, only silence broken by these strange encounters like ghost stories made real. Scholars tried to explain it, blaming natural events or secret Concord factions trying to cause fear, but the old traders and border scouts whispered a different truth. They said the humans had stopped talking, stopped pleading, and started building in the dark. They said the humans had grown tired of being seen as weak and had become something else, something quiet and precise and cold. Soon, a new message began appearing on the long-range scans of passing ships, not transmitted, but burned into the sensor logs as if by some strange echo. Human space, no entry. This is your only warning. It was not signed, but everyone knew where it came from. And so the galaxy watched, confused and afraid, unsure if the ghosts in the void were real or just shadows of guilt and pride. But deep in the silence beyond the old borders, machines, the size of moons, turned slowly. Solar arrays unfolded like petals in the dark, and behind every black star, something ancient and human waited with eyes wide open. A cold silence hung over the Galactic Concord's main council hall as a new report arrived, blinking red on every screen. This time it was no rumor, no whisper passed between traders or drunk mercenaries. This was from a military vessel, a battle-class Zentari cruiser called the Brazen Thorn, sent on a routine patrol near the edges of the Sol system under orders from a Concord Security Council that refused to admit fear, a show of power, meant to remind the humans that they were still small, still part of the old order, still answerable to the laws written by ancient empires. The Brazen Thorn entered the Kuiper Belt with full shields, weapons armed, and a command crew that laughed at the stories of ghost ships and vanishing probes. But their laughter died the moment Earth appeared on the main viewports, because Earth was no longer the same. From orbit it looked brighter, wrapped in a faint blue glow, like a planet breathing light. Around it spun rings of metal, hundreds of them, thick and perfect, forming a halo of megastructures that had not been there months ago. There were no welcome messages, no warnings, no threats, just silence, until a low hum began to build across every deck of the Zentari ship. Not from outside, but from inside their own systems, like a signal too low to hear, but strong enough to shake the bones. Then the crew saw it. Dozens of ships rising from the dark side of Earth, shaped like long black spears, moving without fire or engine trails, simply gliding forward on invisible currents. The commander of the Brazen Thorn tried to retreat, issuing the order to jump to FTL, but the system refused, locked by an override that did not exist in their database, and one by one, the lights across the ship dimmed until only emergency power remained. The last image they sent back to the Concorde was not a battle, not a threat, but a still image. A human figure standing on the hull of one of the black ships, unprotected in the vacuum of space, eyes glowing white, staring directly into the bridge camera before the signal cut out and never returned. When this report was shown to the Concord Council, panic started to show in the cracks of their careful faces, because now they could no longer pretend, no longer say it was just fear and lies. Someone suggested diplomacy again, but no one volunteered to go. Then worse news arrived. A Sularan splinter faction, angry at what they saw as weakness, had taken matters into their own hands, sending a covert fleet to Proxima Centauri with orders to attack a known human station and force them to respond, to teach them their place before others tried to follow their example. The fleet arrived in perfect formation, cloaked and armed, but they never saw the station. Instead, they found themselves floating inside a massive sphere of hexagonal panels that surrounded the entire system, invisible until it activated. The fleet's sensors failed instantly. Their ships began to rotate against their will, and time seemed to twist. Some crew saw memories play in reverse, others watched hours pass in seconds, and then everything stopped. Only one fragment of a drone returned to Sularan space, its outer shell burnt smooth, its memory logs wiped clean, except for one recorded phrase: "They've evolved." That message played in every conquered chamber, every military base, every science lab, and with it came questions no one wanted to answer. How had the humans built such things in such a short time? Where had they hidden this power, and why were they still silent? The galaxy, once confident and proud, now felt small and watched, like children in a room full of unreadable machines. Scientists tried to explain it as tricks, decoys, illusions, false data, but deep down, everyone knew the truth. This was no trick, this was a choice, and the humans were not hiding anymore. They were showing just enough to be seen to remind the galaxy that something had changed forever. Old alliances began to crack. Minor species started pulling out of Concord meetings, worried that staying too close to the core might make them targets if the humans struck back, while others began reaching out in secret, trying to send peace. Messages into human space through old codes and hidden frequencies. Nothing was answered. Earth remained quiet, its rings spinning, its stations glowing faintly like stars being born. Even Sul itself, the ancient sun, now pulsed with strange rhythms, as if humans had tapped into it, shaped it, made it part of their silence. Across the stars, freighters changed their routes, staying far from any path near human systems, and maps were redrawn with bold red lines labeled simply Terran Void, do not enter, but it was already too late. The spark had been lit, not a spark of war, not yet, but something deeper, a fear that turned into respect, a respect that turned into strategy, and strategy that slowly twisted into obedience. Because in the dark places of the universe, beyond the reach of the Concord's laws and comfort, captains and scouts and smugglers all whispered the same thing now, the same quiet truth that echoed louder than any speech. The humans had not left the galaxy. They had stepped away, changed, and now they were watching, waiting, preparing for something no one else could see. And whether it would bring peace or punishment, none could say, but everyone understood one thing clearly: the galaxy would never be the same again. Across the vast halls of the Galactic Concord, the once proud symbols of unity, towering banners, shining star maps, and great statues of shared victories, now looked like relics of a forgotten age, gathering dust as silence and fear crept into every corner. The Central Council chamber, once full of bold voices and constant debate, now echoed with nervous whispers and hesitant footsteps, as if the air itself had grown heavy with dread. It had been 3 standard months since the human withdrawal, 3 months since the Sularan fleet vanished inside the hexagon sphere, and nothing had been the same since. No messages from Earth, no sightings of Terran ships, only strange pulses, a long-forgotten sensor paths and systems quietly falling dark near the old human borders. The Concord leaders, once sure of their power, now met. Behind locked doors, arguing in circles, unable to agree on what to do next, because for the first time in thousands of cycles, the center of galactic control no longer felt like the center at all. Smaller species, tired of fear and forgotten, in the shadows of the big powers, started to leave, some quietly, some openly, closing their embassies, pulling their fleets, and declaring independence from the Concord, no longer willing to be part of a system that couldn't even protect its own patrol ships. Others followed, not out of defiance but out of desperation, retreating to their home systems and sealing their space behind ancient shields. The collapse was not loud. It was slow, patient, like the slow cracking of ice before it breaks apart, and each fracture made the next easier to accept. Trade routes dried up as carriers refused to cross the Terran void, and with them went vital supplies, economic flows, diplomatic visits, all gone in the blink of a cycle. Rumors spread that certain Concord members had begun sending secret requests to the humans, offering deals, tribute, even submission in exchange for protection or advanced tech. But no responses came, and those caught doing so were quietly punished. by Concord security forces desperate to maintain the illusion of control. The old powers, the Sularans, the Zentari, the Yalori, met often trying to plot a new way forward, but they no longer trusted each other, and the fear of Terran retaliation hung over every decision. Defense networks were reactivated, fleets repositioned, and border systems fortified. But it all felt hollow, like preparing for a storm you knew had already passed you by. Then came the fall of Virel Station, one of the largest Concord hubs in the Mid-Reach sector, a floating city with 1 million citizens and a military archive dating back to the foundation of the Council. It went dark without warning, its beacon silenced, its orbit drifting off course by 0.2 degrees every hour. A scout team sent to investigate found the station completely empty, every room undamaged, every power cell untouched, but not a single life form inside. The data cores were wiped, and only one message remained, glowing across the main viewing wall. "We remember. Do you?" The image of that message spread across the galaxy within hours, causing widespread panic. Entire governments began to collapse under the pressure, and uprisings began on outer colonies where leaders had promised safety and received only silence. The Concord's emergency response teams were too slow, their fleets too scattered, and their allies too afraid to help. Everyone was watching the humans, wondering when they would act again, and the longer they waited, the worse it became. At the center of the crumbling order, Ambassador Threon of the Yalori, once a calm and respected voice of reason, stood alone in the chamber and declared that the age of the Concord was over, that the humans had not broken it, but revealed its weakness, shown the cracks that had always been there, hidden behind rules and pride. Some called him a traitor, but more nodded in silence, knowing it was true. From the shadows of what was once unity, something new began to form. Small coalitions, secret alliances, whispers of regional control zones rising from the ruins, all trying to fill the void left by the collapsing council. But none of them dared to claim leadership for fear of drawing the attention of the Terrans. The galaxy had not seen a single shot fired by a human ship, and yet entire systems fell into silence, entire orders crumbled, and ancient empires bent under a pressure they could not measure. In this silence, something far more powerful than war had taken hold. Doubt, and with it came change, slow and unstoppable. Far beyond the reach of conquered senses, near the heart of old Earth, massive structures moved like sleeping giants, casting long shadows across starlight, and at their core were not weapons, but ideas of sovereignty, of defense, of patience, sharpened into precision. The humans had withdrawn not out of fear, but out of purpose, and now the galaxy finally understood what that purpose was, not to dominate, not to destroy, but to wait for the old to collapse on its own and to rise from the ashes with no challengers left. The collapse of the old order was nearly complete, and in its quiet ruin, a new power stirred, watchful, waiting, unchallenged. In the cold dark of space, where broken satellites drifted like ghosts and forgotten beacons blinked into nothing, the galaxy held its breath as the silence of the Terran void stretched further, swallowing more than borders, more than systems. It swallowed fear, trust, and time itself. For many, the collapse of the Concord had brought chaos, but for others, it had brought something far more dangerous: opportunity. In the shadow of the old order's fall, the last of the defiant rose from their hiding places, convinced the humans were bluffing, that the disappearances and the warnings were just clever tricks from a species that had been too quiet for too long. Admiral Vokran of the Zentari Dominion, once silenced by fear, now rallied a fleet of old allies and scattered warlords, forging a new military force called the Crimson Banner, a bold name drawn in haste and desperation. He claimed that the galaxy must strike first before the humans decided to do so, and promised to reclaim the lost systems with fire and force. His fleet of over 200 ships gathered at the edge of Alpha Centauri, lined in perfect rows, their engines humming, like war drums in the dark, and their weapons primed not to threaten, but to strike. The plan was simple: attack the Terran observation posts still visible near Proxima, break through the black ring formations, and send a message that the galaxy would not kneel. What Admiral Vokran failed to understand, what none of them understood, was that the reckoning had already begun, not with fire, but with design. The moment his fleet crossed into Terran-monitored space, every ship in the formation lost long-range communication, not through jamming, but through a complete shutdown of all external transmitters, as if they no longer existed in the universe at all. Their own sensor feeds looped old footage, showing calm stars and false silence, even as strange black shapes moved between them in patterns no AI could track. At Bure 100 hours ship time, the flagship Blood Sun picked up a flicker ahead. Just a flicker. No heat, no motion, just a shift in starfield. And then, one by one, the ships in the outer formation began to drift out of alignment, not from damage, but from internal systems being taken over, lights blinking in strange sequences across every hull. The captains tried to regain control, but their own voices were lost in static, and all across the fleet the same message blinked across screens in every language known to the Concorde. You were warned. Then came the light, silent, soft, but blinding, filling every viewport, not from an explosion, but from hundreds of Terran ships uncloaking at once, their surfaces mirror-black and smooth, shaped not for beauty, but for something colder and more exact. Not one of them fired a weapon, but instead sent pulses of energy that shut down engines, disabled shields, and made targeting systems fold like wet paper. Admiral Vokran gave the order to fire, but only 5 ships obeyed, and those 5 were gone in less than a second, not destroyed, just removed, blinked out of space as if erased from time. The rest of the fleet sat paralyzed, floating in a sphere of quiet judgment, until one voice came through the silence. Not loud, not cruel, just firm and clear. This is not a war. This is a reminder. And with that, the Terran fleet vanished, as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the Crimson Banner dead in the void, its ships drifting powerless, with systems locked and coordinates scrambled. Rescue teams later found the crews unharmed, asleep in cryo without ever entering stasis. All memories from the moment of entry to exit erased, their minds showing only one image when scanned: a vast black tower rising from the surface of Mars, glowing faintly with a white light. That image spread like a virus across the stars, and this time no one tried to twist the truth, because now it was clear the humans were not bluffing, and their silence was not weakness. It was discipline, the kind that came after pain, after being ignored, underestimated, and mocked for too long. Across the stars, the message was received. Systems that had prepared fleets for invasion now began to dismantle them, afraid of being seen as aggressive. Colonies that had laughed at Terran silence now sent peace envoys, offering knowledge, trade, even tribute. But the Terrans remained quiet, only watching, measuring. On the edge of the Alarin cluster, where an old Concorde lab once studied early human tech, a strange rift opened, just for 1 second, and through it came a simple cube of unknown material, marked with Terran code. Inside, it held one phrase, burned into its surface with precision: balance has been restored. Scientists argued over its meaning, but the galaxy already knew the truth. The reckoning was not revenge. It was not destruction. It was clarity. The humans had not come to conquer but to correct, and they had done so without firing a single true shot. In the new silence that followed, a calm deeper than peace began to settle, not born from trust, but from understanding that some lines must not be crossed, and some voices, when quiet, are listening harder than ever. And somewhere on the dark side of Earth, beneath layers of steel and code, the Terran command watched the stars, waiting not for war, but for the day the galaxy finally learned to listen. Stars burned quietly across the cold night of space, as if the galaxy itself had paused to breathe, and somewhere in that long silence, change began, not loud or fast, but real and steady, like a tide that could not be stopped. The old powers, once loud and proud, now whispered in low tones, meeting in smaller chambers, no longer speaking of conquest or control, but of caution, of balance, of rebuilding what had fallen apart. The name Terran no longer stirred laughter or fear. It carried weight, like a law that needed no court, like gravity itself. Planets once loyal to the broken Concord began forming new councils, not to rule others, but to understand themselves, to protect their own borders, and more importantly, to avoid stepping too close to the Terran void, a name now marked in every star map in red, not as a warning of threat, but as a reminder of restraint. Traders began telling new stories, how they passed near Earth's orbit and saw machines so vast they blocked sunlight, how stations once thought abandoned now moved silently with strange patterns, how signals once considered background noise were decoded into messages of mathematics, philosophy, and peace, sent on repeat across hidden frequencies. No threats, no demands, just patterns that seemed to ask, will you build or will you burn? The galaxy, broken by its own pride, began to rebuild differently this time. Smaller nations worked together without the Concord's oversight, using Terran models of open-source energy grids and planetary defense systems, things stolen years ago, but now freely shared through anonymous bursts of data no one dared trace. It was as if the humans were guiding without touching, shaping without leading, like gardeners in the dark. Young species born after the final meeting grew up hearing the stories not of war, but of the reckoning, of a fleet erased without fire, of ships silenced by thought alone, and of a single voice that reminded them, this is not war. This is a reminder. Some feared the humans still, others respected them, but more and more, something stranger began to form. A kind of admiration, quiet but growing, like awe for a mountain too vast to climb. Even rogue captains and border smugglers who once mocked Earth now spoke carefully when passing near Terran space, sometimes leaving behind gifts, cargo, old data, even letters, offered without expectation, like offerings at a shrine. And still, the humans remained mostly silent, only watching, only responding when the line was crossed, and always with precision, never cruelty. On the outer edge of the Vrenari belt, a pirate fleet once tried to enslave a neutral science colony. The moment the attack began, every pirate ship shut down, drifted, then vanished, and the colony awoke to find a Terran drone in orbit, its surface reflecting the stars, its only message a single word: enough. No more pirates came to that region, and no one questioned why. The galaxy, without conquered rule, slowly found its own order, not perfect but growing, rooted in cooperation, careful not to provoke, not to dominate. Even old enemies began to speak. Centauri and Yalori diplomats met under shared banners, not out of trust, but out of the understanding that survival now meant peace, that strength was no longer measured in fleet size, but in restraint. And in the heart of it all, Earth remained unseen, wrapped in rings of black metal and flowing energy, spinning like a quiet core of wisdom the galaxy had once rejected and now barely understood. Sometimes, when ships passed close, they picked up faint music or strange symbols drifting through the void, like stories from a forgotten time now told in light instead of words. And the galaxy began to listen, not just to humans, but to itself. In the silence left behind by war and pride, a new kind of unity began, not forced, not ruled, but chosen, slow, patient, careful. And across 1,000 systems, in the whispers of council halls, in the hum of rebuilt stations, in the learning minds of young species, the same question began to rise, quiet but clear. If this is what the Terrans became when left alone, what might we become if we follow their example? And so, a galaxy begins to grow, not under threat, not under rule, but under the weight of lessons long ignored and now remembered, shaped by a power that chose silence over dominance, and reminded all who watched that peace, when protected by strength and forged in patience, is the most unshakable force of all.